And a huge source of that feeling was Deshaun Watson's performance in week 1. We talked about it. It was absolutely pitiful how he came out week 1, how the offense came out week 1. And there were so many issues, and it felt, in the moment, it felt like, it felt to me how the Packers game with Baker felt in that moment.
Yeah.
It felt like, you know what, it's just not going to work here for him. And then he came out today, and Derek, I was really impressed with him today. The amount of progression that we saw from week 1 to week 2 was absolutely fantastic out of him. He was way, way, way more decisive in his reads. He was going through his progressions a lot quicker. He was doing a lot better of staying in the pocket and not running out left and right to try to avoid the pressure. He was stepping up in the pocket, making throws, going to his check downs. And in the minimal times where he did escape the pocket to have to create some time, he made some great plays. So with that being said, Derek, you know, when we look at that week 1 performance today, in your opinion, what's like a couple of the biggest takeaways, especially from this game?
Yeah, so with last week, and I went back, watched the All-22, watched every offensive snap, slowed down frame for frame, just to get a better idea of, like, okay, how much it was Deshaun, how much it was the offensive line, how much it was play calling or receivers maybe not being open, like, where does the share of blame go? Tristan, we talked about it, but I left that All-22 just absolutely jaw on the floor at how terrible Deshaun Watson was. Last week, we mentioned it many times, he was bailing out of clean pockets when he had them. Most of the sacks in that game, I would 1,000% argue, were on Deshaun Watson. He was holding on to the football. And the frustrating part about that game was his eyes a lot of times were in the right spot. Now, there was a lot of times he didn't keep his eyes downfield, and he was freaking out because of the pressure, which is fair. I understand that. But there were a lot of times his eyes were in the right spot, and he just simply did not throw the ball. And I couldn't tell you why. It didn't make sense then. It still doesn't make sense now. But that game was horrible for Deshaun Watson. And there was a lot of blame shifting. A lot of people trying to blame Kevin. A lot of people trying to blame receivers, offensive line, wherever you want to place the blame. But the reality of it, Deshaun Watson was atrocious week 1. Absolutely atrocious. Worst quarterback in the NFL level play. And I stand on that. Today, Tristan, what I saw out of Deshaun Watson, and he went 22 of 34, 186 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He did have 5 rushes for 20 yards and a touchdown, so he got a QB keeper for a touchdown today. What I saw out of Deshaun was a quarterback who, and you've said this many times, so I'm giving you the credit here, operated in the system. All we needed from Deshaun Watson was to just do what he is supposed to do within the Kevin Stefanski, Ken Dorsey offense. And it was clear to see last week there were guys open. He just flat out didn't throw the ball. This week, what I saw was a guy who didn't try to play hero ball. He went through his progressions much better. He seemed a lot more confident in his decision-making, in what his eyes saw. You know, and he didn't really do anything special. In my opinion, I think there's going to be a lot of people that leave this game today and say, man, Deshaun Watson's back. We got our guy. Like, he looked great. No. If you want my opinion, I think Deshaun Watson did his job. And this is kind of what I said last week with Dak Prescott. Cowboys didn't do anything spectacular. They didn't do anything crazy offensively. Dak just did his job. Hit the guys he was supposed to hit. That's how I feel about Deshaun Watson this week. I think Deshaun did a great job of, hitting the open man. Not saying there wasn't times where he made some big-time plays. We talked about it before the podcast. He certainly did extend plays and, kind of evaded pressure and made some throws. He looked good. But I don't want to go as far as a lot of people are going and saying, oh, he looked great. He looked fantastic. He looked elite. No, Deshaun Watson looked like a starting quarterback. He did his job. And we see what that amounted to today. It wasn't the prettiest game. It wasn't, the best game. But Deshaun Watson doing his job, being good enough, led the Browns to a win. And I don't want to jump into the defense too quick here, but Tristan, what did we say last week? They go hand in hand. And when you have an offense that's sustaining drives and can stay on the field, the defense plays better. Wow. Crazy how that works, Tristan. But Deshaun Watson today, what did you think? What was your biggest takeaways?
Yeah. So as far as you mentioned his eyes before, like in week 1, he was looking at all the right places. He just wasn't decisive. Kurt Warner had a really good breakdown of this. Highly recommend anybody out there take a look at that video, that all 22 breakdown that he did, because he really did highlight that in particular with his eyes not being in the right places. He just wasn't decisive. He didn't take his options that were in front of him. Excuse me real quick. When I look at his performance today, you mentioned I was talking about this before we started recording as well. He did a really good job of playing within the structure of the offense. Where I will give him a little bit more credit, though, there were several plays where he did extend the play, running, escaping out of the pocket, and then finding a guy open. He did a really good job of that today. He did improvise very well today. The important thing was he wasn't doing it too much. He wasn't continuously playing hero ball. It was moments of hero ball, which is what we needed. We needed those moments of hero ball, and he gave us those moments, which is why I was so impressed with him today. When I look back at last week, he did a good job at first of playing within the structure of the offense, and then he got desperate and he just abandoned it. And that's where he had so many of his issues come up. He was forcing balls. He was just, it was just a mess with him. And today it looked a lot more calm, a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Intentional, I guess. Poised. Yes. Thank you. And he was taking what the defense was giving him, and that was plenty that we needed today. Certainly, I think that there's other factors to this game that contributed to him not doing even better statistically, and we will absolutely get into that stuff. But Derek, as far as what I want out of a quarterback, he did everything I could have asked for out of him today. And we got to give him credit for that, because even though he didn't make that highlight reel play that, is going to be posted all over Twitter and stuff like that, he still did enough to win. And the important thing here, and something that I do want to mention because I think it's very important, he outplayed Trevor Lawrence. Yes. And I don't really even think it was close. Trevor Lawrence had a couple of good throws. Outside of that, there was really nothing, which you could credit that to our defense as well, because our defense did play very well, and we will get into that as well. But Deshaun Watson was the more effective, the more, what's the word I'm looking for? Productive. He was the more productive quarterback today. And I was really impressed. I was really, really impressed. And this was a bad weather game. You mentioned it. It was absolutely something that did have an impact on the game, especially as the game kind of moved on. It felt like it was really taking away from our passing attack, which we had a solid one today. I really can't complain about Deshaun Watson's game. He did have that one throw, I believe it was to Jerry Jeudy on the first drive, that it looked to me like it almost got picked, and then it bobbled up, and then Jeudy brought it down. Thank goodness. But that was like the riskiest throw that he made of the day, versus last week he had like 3 or 4 that you looked at and you were like, oh wow, that really could have been picked off. That was really the only one to me that I noted. Was just that one throw, and I mean, hey, it ended up working out. So hats
Yeah.
off to Deshaun. What a turnaround from last week. But I think you're absolutely right when you talk about, does this mean he's back? Does that mean that he had an elite performance? Absolutely not. I think that he's got to do this for many weeks in a row. I will
Mhm.
not be comfortable saying that he's back until he goes, plays Philly in Philadelphia, and he's able to look good in that situation. If he
Yeah.
can do that, right? I know these next games are very, very winnable for us, and we're playing what we feel is less talented opposition, and the expectation is he should look good in each of those games. He should look better game after game. For me, that game against Philadelphia is going to be the next big test before I can truly say this is the Deshaun Watson that we traded for. I can't say that before we get to that point.
Yeah. And I think, the biggest thing for me, what you mentioned there, as far as like him being back, I think this should be like the standard. Like this level of quarterback play should be the bottom line expectation, not that he played really good. Because this is what a starting quarterback does in the NFL, or at least a middle tier or a solid starter does in the NFL. 22, 34, 186 yards, right? No touchdowns, no picks. Again, the rushing touchdown. But again, Deshaun just did his job. And the Kevin Stefanski offense, a lot of people, and there's a lot of people who, claim to know football, and certainly we're no football experts and know every single detail about every single thing. But quarterbacks tend to play well in the Kevin Stefanski offense because why? He makes it, I don't want to say simpler, easier to do their job, right? When it comes to, okay, ball should be here, this is your first read. And I know, obviously, a lot of offenses, you go through your progressions, whatever. And there was a lot of people critical today of, hey, well, the offense still played in a box and it still didn't really attack deep downfield. I'm here to tell you, this is just my opinion, Tristan, you don't have to agree. I think that's all we can do. For me, I think Deshaun Watson, when I watched him week 1, when I watched him today, even though he had a good performance today, I don't believe Deshaun has the arm to throw downfield anymore. I did a research into, partial research into other topic, but I did research into Deshaun Watson's injury history. And I've been saying that I think Deshaun's career reminds me a lot of Cam Newton. When you pull up the injury report, Deshaun's had the 2 ACLs, right? He's still mobile. He can still move around. Awesome. But the shoulder injuries from last season, I think they've really hindered him as far as his downfield passing game, right? And what you saw today was Deshaun Watson in that 20, 25-yard box. I thought he looked good. He looked accurate. He had the arm strength to get it there. And this is just me personally, I don't believe that the best game plan of attack with Deshaun Watson, as long as he's starting in Cleveland, is to really try to attack downfield. And I think the offensive game plan for today, as far as the pass game goes, I think was perfect. I think Kevin Stefanski, I think Ken Dorsey did an outstanding job today. And again, a lot of people complain about it. Yes, I would love to pass downfield too. But again, just my belief with Deshaun and his injury, and what I believe to be limitations, at least for now. Maybe we'll see how he develops over the season. I think they called a fantastic game plan. I think the play calling from the standpoint of where the progressions are, where his eyes should be, what should be his first and second targets, I thought was outstanding today. I thought it was outstanding. And that's kind of, for me, Tristan, a big difference from game 1 to game 2. A lot of what you saw from the Browns offensively, as far as like the game plan wise, was, I think, a lot more downfield. Ken Dorsey, Kevin Stefanski, whoever is calling up these plays in the quarterback room. Week 1, there was a lot more downfield development as far as these routes. In this game, I thought they kept it pretty simple, conservative, whatever you want to call it, but it worked. And I think that's what we, what we need to do. But Before we move on to another factor of why the play calling I think was much improved, Tristan, you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying about the approach moving forward is to not necessarily have Deshaun Watson taking all of these home run shots. I completely agree with you there. It's something that I think that we need to game plan to beat teams majority of the time in that 20 to 25 yard box that you mentioned. Um, what I will say is I do disagree about Deshaun not, and this isn't your exact words, but this is just paraphrasing. Deshaun not having the arm strength or the arm to have a deep passing threat anymore. I think that there's a couple of factors that went into that, especially when we're talking about today. It was a bad weather game. You were down to James Hudson and Jermaine Ifedi as your offensive tackles. I don't know about you, Derek, but I don't like the fact that that was the case. I wouldn't have Deshaun holding the ball more than 4 seconds. Like that, you're just asking for trouble there. And we did have issues with drops today. I thought that he did have a few throws that were deep down the field that were well placed. It's just guys just didn't make plays for him. That's what it was to me. Again, I'll look at the all 22 and maybe I'll see something different. But you know, when I look at week 1, I could see that what you were saying there, especially because he had all those balls where he was like 10 yards overthrown, 10 yards underthrown. Like he had a lot of that. And I think that is partially because of his rehab with his shoulder. I think he's still getting used to it. But at the same time, I don't think that element to his game is completely gone. And even though right now we're not seeing it, I don't think it's something that we can expect to not see moving forward. I think that it's just as this offense gets through its growing pains, as we get our tackles back healthy, I think, and as he gets more comfortable with his arm, I expect that will open up a lot more later down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think for me, the one thing that kind of pointed that out to me was just kind of his mechanics. His footwork was much improved today from last Sunday. It was night and day. But as far as how he's throwing, and I'm not a quarterbacks coach. I don't know if anybody who watching is. If you are, please comment in the comment section. But to me, Tristan, I think obviously as a quarterback, it's a mixture of, your hips, your feet, torque, all those sorts of things, right? Deshaun Watson, in my opinion, is putting a lot more of that twist in than he used to. Which obviously arm strength is one thing, but you don't just want to throw with your arm. You want to, wind up and get into it. The difference, at least for me, what I saw was Deshaun has put way much more body movement into his throw than just strictly arm. As of late, which, hey, I don't know everything as far as, the quarterback position, certainly not as much as Deshaun does, but just from me knowing, the details I do know, that is one thing that I picked up on. And I that's one part of his game that I am kind of watching a lot more. And we'll see. You mentioned it. It's something that's going to change down the road, and we'll have to just see how it goes. But